sharing our stories connects us. Listen and be connected. Join us for the conversation meeting weekly at the intersection of community and culture. Hosted by Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter. I love it when it comes on and says, and Joe King Carter. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And this week, I'm not going to mess it up. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Oh, there you go.
Joey. You know, when I woke up this morning, I said to myself, every week at noon when we start the show, I say, good morning, everybody.
That's right.
And no, Mr. Nunez.
That's right.
It is past the noon hour.
I'm going to say good afternoon. I'm going to say good afternoon. I'm going to say good afternoon.
And I said it, Joey. I said it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to WMNF, WMNF.org. This is 88.5 community, your community radio station right here in West Central Florida. Again, I'm your host, Mario Nunez. This is The Conversation. And as always, I'm seated next to my broadcast partner,
Joe King Carter.
There he is. There he is.
Yeah.
He came sliding in on two wheels.
Yeah.
When
Life is busy, man.
It is.
Why is it so complicated?
Why does it have to be that complicated?
That's right. It is, though.
So let me ask you this, Joey. How was your week off?
My week was a good week.
Productive?
Very productive. Life is good.
For those that don't know, Joey does on weekends and sometimes during the week, he does Ybor City history tours.
Yes.
And sometimes if you inspire him, he'll do an Ybor City ghost tour. Because again, for those listening, maybe for the first time today, Tampa and in particular Ybor City and in particular the Cuban Club is on the top of the list of paranormal activity. And ghost hunters, as it were, they come from all corners of the earth.
Well, the TV show Ghost Hunters itself was there. Yeah, absolutely.
Joey, I cut you off. I'm sorry. How was your week?
No, my week was good. And at the same time, I'd like to say, politically speaking, I want to say to everybody out there, please get involved, be involved, vote. That's what's going to make the difference in the next few years here as we witness a lot of political
chicanery, shenanigans,
events.
Skullduggery. I don't even know what that word means, but I love to say it.
Yeah, so just be involved. Folks.
I don't know how to spell it either, but maybe we'll ask our
And I also have
our guest today. How do you spell skullduggery?
I also wanted to mention. Speaking,
yes,
you mentioned you spoke the word Ybor City, the wellspring from which Tampa grew mostly.
Thank you.
That on April 9th, I'm going to announce an event because of a former guest we had, Dr. Sarah McNamara, who is a real, true, hardcore academic historian, professor at Texas A&M. And she wrote a book called Ybor City, Chronicles of the Latina South. It is such a great book. And she is doing a little event lecture on April 9th at 6 p.m. At the HCC in the Ybor room. And it's free. And come on out, folks, because if you hear Sarah McNamara talk about history, you will be altered.
And she's a fellow Tampeña. She's born and raised here.
Oh, yeah,
so
she's one of the group. Yeah,
she's connected organically to the stories that she writes about. And again, PhD, very learned, and just a wonderful, wonderful authority on all things Ybor City.
Absolutely,
So
and we just finished
many historians.
We just finished Women's Month, and what Sarah has done has brought much greater attention to the history of Latinas in Ybor City, Ybor City's history, the history throughout the entire South America, throughout the Caribbean, all of that stuff about Latinas and their involvement in our history. And it's about time that stuff gets really showcased.
Well, when you think, Joe, about the suffragettes that we all know about, the suffragettes, I believe that's suffragettes,
correct.
Yes, we'll ask our guest today if I'm right on that. You know, we think about thank you. We think about that. The disembodied voice. We'll introduce her to you in just a moment. You know, we think about the marches in New York and in the Northeast and the great cities of the Northeast back in the early 1900s. That was all happening right here in Tampa, in Ybor City at the same time. So it's fascinating. It's wonderful. Please, if you're available, come and join us because Joe and I will be there as well. And also, let me just say, right at the top of the show, way to go, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Right out the box.
Yes.
Right out the box. Take that, Mr. What's his name? Leon Musk. Take that and your $20 million. Didn't buy you much, did it?
Wow. You know, can you imagine the concept
$20 million
of buying votes? I mean, could anything be more anti-American than buying votes? This is something that is just unbelievable that someone thinks ethically and morally this is an appropriate thing to do. So, I mean, yes, I am so thrilled that his efforts failed in this count. And that's not taking a political position right or left. That's just saying nobody, even a progressive, should be trying to buy votes. Come on.
Attaboy, Joey. But
Yeah.
I'll take the political position. I'm just saying, I slept a little bit easier last night. We still got a long way to go. Last thing before we get to our guests, my hero, besides Mark Biro, my hero is Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
What an incredible 25 hours on his feet without a break, addressing the entire world really and truthfully from the Senate floor. I just don't know that that'll ever be, that's one of those deals. That's 56 game hitting streak. That's back-to-back no-hitters. That's the feat that will, and isn't it fitting that a black man overcame or eclipsed the previous record on the Senate floor for commanding the Senate floor from the racist, and we know Strom Thurmond, what he was all about. So I just think I slept a little bit better last night, although, again, I digress. We still have a long way to go. Joey, let's start the show in earnest.
By the way, for film buffs, that's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
I thought he was going to collapse at some point. I thought that was what's going to happen. Right. He was going to have that moment where he just fell onto his knees, and then and then medical would have to rush in. But that was not the case. My man didn't even unbutton his jacket for 25 hours.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Spectacular.
It's amazing.
Okay, so we got a lot to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Let's introduce our guests and get going.
All right. Well, so we have with us today Diane Egner.
Hello.
Correct.
Hello, Diane. How are you?
I haven't been better.
Good. And your green jacket is spectacular. St. Patty's Day was a couple of weeks ago, but you really still look great in green.
Springtime.
Spring is in the air.
I'm definitely getting a strong Irish vibe over here. There's no doubt about that.
I have Irish roots.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
So tell us what 83... Well, first of all, introduce yourself as the publisher of 83 Degrees, and what is an 83 Degrees?
So I am the publisher of 83 Degrees Media, an online magazine or digital magazine that was created in 2009 to fill some gaps in what was being reported about our community, the Tampa Bay region. And we've been going strong ever since. Couldn't be happier doing it.
And we're grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
Because as those of us that have been here for a moment know that we've lost not only our Tampa Times, which has been gone for a little while, more recently our Tampa Tribune, and then why they saw the need to change the name of a wonderful periodical, the St. Petersburg Times, Poindexter Institute, to the Tampa Bay Times. Yeah.
Pointer Institute, yes.
Yeah. Why did they do that? I don't know. But listen, we have things like creative loafing.
I did what I do.
Yeah, you go. we have things like creative loafing and 83 Degrees to kind of really tell us what's going on.
Yes, we were started with the thought in mind that the narrative about Tampa didn't match reality. The narrative about Tampa nationally tended to be things like going to the beaches and visiting Disney and a lot of old people retiring here and maybe weird Florida man around the corner. That was kind of like all people knew about Florida and about the Tampa Bay area. And we set out to tell the stories of reality, reflecting the creatives, the entrepreneurs, the doers, the makers, the people who are actually helping to shape our future through the work that they were doing today.
Excellent. So before we get back to that and deepen that, because there's a lot of stuff there to talk about, let's talk a little about where you came from and where you grew up.
How you got to Tampa?
Sure. I'm a lifelong journalist, so to speak. My mother encouraged me to write and read, especially as a child. I grew up on a farm in Minnesota. My parents were both college educated and very perhaps different in some ways from other people that we lived around. So education was king in our house. Libraries, books were king in our house.
Mucho reading.
And reading all the time.
Library card always in the pocket.
When you're a kid on a farm, you can get bored pretty quickly after the chores are done. So read. That's what I did. And it taught me a lot. It introduced me to places I'd never been. It introduced me to ideas and people and concepts that I found worthy of exploring. And basically, as soon as I was old enough, I got off the farm to go to the University of Minnesota and studied journalism.
And did you have siblings?
I'm the middle of 5,
Wow.
So I never got a word in edgewise.
True.
Well, that's typical of farm.
But you wrote your ideas down. You know what I mean? You journaled. You journaled. That's right.
Farm life. That's the reason I asked, because it's not uncommon even today for some reason there'd be a little more children out there on the farm. You need those hired hands, I guess, that aren't hired.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was very common in my day for married couples to have 5, 6, 10 kids on a farm and raise them very well and have fresh food and plenty of exercise.
Strapping young men and women, sure.
You learned a work ethic. It was in a lot of ways an ideal place to grow up. Today, the farming community is a little different. I was back there to my hometown in Minnesota this past summer, and farms are no longer the little, 160 acres that they once were. Now they're like 3,000 acres, and they're owned by some corporation out of Chicago, and the farmers are paid to farm the land, basically, a percentage of the profits of the crops. So it's a real different mindset, and it's a real different feeling in terms of what I would think of as sort of connection to the land. That connection's not as strong as it once was.
But Minnesota has always been, as far north as Minnesota is geographically from us here in Florida, I always equated Minnesota with things like ice fishing and, of course, hockey. And the Golden Gophers are always in the,
Absolutely. Tony Dungy was quarterback of the Gophers when I was a senior in college.
There you go. So
it tells you how old I am.
And I was going to ask you what year you graduated, but thank you for sharing that with us. And of course, the Gagne family is legendary in Minnesota and wrestling. So wrestling came out of the upper Northwest. But Minnesota, I wanted to ask you, is there such a thing as Minnesota nice? We hear so much about that. Tell us about Minnesota nice.
I hear that all the time, too.
What do you think?
People sometimes use it as a derogatory term.
I don't.
I think of it as a credit to people.
There you go.
People tend to be friendly. They're more, I think,
gracious.
more open, more gracious, more accepting of people who are different. I never really ran into what I think of today as racism till I came to the South.
Listen, let me tell you, talk about a state that has led the nation in many ways in DEI. Minnesota comes to mind first and foremost.
Absolutely.
I think about the Minnesota Vikings in the 1960s when a few of their star players,
The Purple People Eaters,
when a few look at Diane, would you please?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that they led the way. There were a lot of the African American athletes that were married. They had interracial marriages before that was a cool thing, or before it was a thing.
Yeah,
My point
Jim
is,
Marshall, Carl Eller.
there you go. There, you know what I'm talking about. So I've always been, and I think it has to do with the cold winters.
And by
I'm
the way,
sorry.
those men all went on to college, and some of them became lawyers. I think Alan
the
Page
congressman
became a judge.
A judge, that's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So you had a great upbringing in Minnesota.
I did.
But you got tired of the winters. I'm thinking, Joey, she might have got tired of the winters, and that's why she sprouted wings and flew south.
Also, she's been. My response to this is that you were served well, because I've met a number of people like this in my life who reading was really a big part of their childhood, and that always serves you so well in life later. So good on you, and good on your parents. That was allowed. That's a very cool thing. So now you're in high school, and you decide to go to college and get off the farm. And where do you go?
Well, from there, the most significant things I did was I worked for the daily newspaper at the University of Minnesota, and then I interned at the Minneapolis Star, which was an evening newspaper at the time that's no longer there, and the Washington Post. And it was at the Washington Post that I met my editor there, was a gentleman named Bill McAllister, who knew a guy named Andy Barnes, who ran the St. Pete Times, and connected me as a place to go for a job after my internship. So I actually came to Florida to work at what's now the Tampa Bay Times, as a copy editor, a part-time copy editor. And in those days, part-time copy editors worked about, 42 hours a week and had no benefits. And it was a kind of a grueling work environment in some ways, but I needed a full-time job. I needed benefits, et cetera. And the Tampa Tribune called me and offered me a full-time job as a reporter. And I went back and talked to Andy Barnes, talked to some other folks, and basically they didn't have an opening for me at the time, and I needed it then. So I went to work in for the Tampa Tribune and stayed for 25 years.
At the Tribune until it closed.
No, I left the Tribune before it closed.
Okay.
It closed in 2016. I left in 2005. I went out to WUSF, Public Broadcasting. I was the content director there, oversaw the radio production, the television production, and the website for about 4.5 years. And then I was part of a conversation here in Tampa. I was representing USF as a board member of the Chamber of Commerce at the time. Judy Genshaft had asked me to serve on the chamber as one of the representatives. And when I was there, the conversation began about what's the narrative about Tampa? What do people know us for? And they, hired consultants, and they got different people going off to do surveys, do man-on-the-street interviews, et cetera, et cetera. And the conclusion was that the narrative didn't match reality. And that was kind of, through those conversations, we became aware of a media company called Issue Media Group out of Detroit, Michigan, that was working to change the narrative of Detroit, and invited them down. They did a presentation. It was at the same era, if you remember, when Richard Florida came to visit and Rise of the Creative Class, and it was all of that conversation going on. And we decided to come up with a new publication here that would reflect reality better than the current sort of storytelling that went on both in fiction writing and in journalism.
You've got 83 degrees, and I want to find out how you came up with the name for 83 degrees, because really and truthfully, these days it could be 95 degrees. I'm just saying, 102 degrees. Full disclosure, Joey, we need to be watching our P's and our Q's and making sure that we're on point today, because Mr. Rob Lora is watching this Facebook feed, so we just want to say, Rob, we love you, man, and we're so grateful that you're watching us today and listening in on us today, and we miss you. Also, if you'd like to get in on the conversation, which apparently is a great name for a noon Wednesday show, The Conversation, let me give you a couple of phone numbers so you can call in and ask questions, or if you have comments you'd like to share. 813-239-9663. We can always take a text from you, 813-433-0885. Send us an email. Jessica Green will read that email as soon as she gets it, provided it has merit.
Absolutely.
Because she is the gatekeeper.
She's our
So if you want to get by Jessica, make sure you're on point. Don't waste our time.
She's Jessica G, the OG.
DJ@WMNF.org.
Absolutely. Now, before we move a little further into that, you went through about 5,000 miles worth of information there.
Yeah.
Let's.
It's because I'm old.
No.
It's because you're experienced.
And you're,
done a
I
lot.
think,
Yeah,
and also, and it's also, I think you have a lot of power under the hood up there.
Correct.
But the point is this:
Thank you.
You said, as from college to these newspapers, and you were interning. Were these series of jobs always writing? Because you apparently did a number of things. Could you talk a little bit?
In the beginning, it was always writing. For some reason, I got assigned to do a lot of murders, and that ended up.
Great segue from Minnesota Nice to the murder desk.
I built my career on crime, and that's because I was a crime reporter,
There you go.
not because I committed any crimes. So there were a couple of really significant murders that got me my byline on the front page of the newspapers.
Nice.
That I worked for even when I was very young, and that catapulted my career into a management role at the Tampa Tribune. I was asked to be a bureau chief out in Pasco County. Still keep in touch with some people out in Pasco County. Lucy Morgan was out there with the Times at the time, so she was kind of, cleaning our clock, basically. I was a young 20-something, and she was the master. So we became friends. I stayed in touch with her until her unfortunate passing a couple of years ago. Then what was your question? I lost track of it.
Well,
different jobs you held.
We were talking about your sort of how you were building skill sets.
Yes.
Let's go just a little bit further back for just a moment, then we'll come forward. Writing. When did you realize that writing was something that you were really obviously good at? I mean, were you in high school when were you writing in high school?
6th, 7th grade?
Yeah, I got a lot of encouragement from a couple of English teachers in high school in particular. One I had the great fortune of actually being with this past summer. He's now close to 90, and he remembers me well. And
share his name with us in case he's out there listening.
I certainly remember him well. He encouraged me not only to write, but he and a couple of them, and there were like 3 in particular that I think of who really encouraged me. Teachers were, very instrumental in how and what shaped my life in terms of career choice.
Right.
They, introduced me to things like I'd never really read poetry until one of my English teachers suggested that I start reading poetry. And I started reading Lawrence Ferlinghetti. That was kind of my introduction to poetry. And then I started writing some poetry. I was just encouraged along the way. And then in high school, the weekly newspaper in town, the gentleman who ran it, was looking for someone who would write about sports, high school sports. So I volunteered that I would write about the high school sports games. So that's kind of how I first wrote for a newspaper.
So these teachers and these individuals obviously saw in you, or they wouldn't have encouraged you, this talent you had.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my principal, too, I shouldn't forget, it was also very, very encouraging.
Right. And then you're also sort of describing the fact that you became sort of a utilitarian writer because you could do probably
all
anything.
topics.
Yeah. I could. And then, in hindsight, I think I could have used a few more years of reporting as much as writing, but reporting, learning how to get information before I became a member of management. But when the opportunity arose, I jumped at it.
Okay, very good. So now let's come back forward to you. Now you did this 25 years for the
Tampa Tribune.
And did you have typical beats that you wrote there?
The Tribune, I had like 14 different positions, starting with a crime reporter, bureau chief. I was assistant state editor. I was assistant metro editor. In 1993, Ed Roberts, who was head of the editorial board at the time, called me. I had just been the political editor for the Tribune in, 1992? And Ed Roberts called me and asked if I would consider joining the editorial board to write opinions, because he felt that our political coverage was as fair, reasonable, and in-depth as he'd ever seen. And he credited me for a lot of that, although I would give credit to the team. We had a dynamic team of writers, photographers, columnists, who all wrote about politics, but he called and asked if I'd join the editorial board, which I did. I was a little intimidated by it at first. This was in the day before Google, if you can imagine.
I can't.
Before Google.
I still
Dewey
remember.
Decimal System, what's that?
Yeah.
I remember learning about Google because my older brother, who was a journalist, called me and said, "Hey, have you heard about Google?" And I was like, "No, what the is that?"
Googly eyes? Like the googly eyes?
And he told me, you got to check it out. This Google's going to change the way we transmit information and how we think about things for the rest forever. And he was right.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, absolutely. He was right.
And now people are starting to name their daughters Siri. I don't know what that means, but she's also now. She's
they
also
talk back.
Good boy. Look at Diane. Huh?
Yeah.
Something tells me her writing style has always been a little edgy.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
That.
So
thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about crime reporting for a moment before we leave that behind.
Sure.
Give us some insight into what that. What does that feel like when you're dealing with that kind of? There's a lot of in there, I would assume.
There is. You really have to sort of guard yourself against becoming, I think, sort of negative about society, about human beings, because you're seeing the worst.
The worst of it.
Beings.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, I saw a lot of murders in my day. I used to sort of have in my head all the addresses of where murders had happened. So people could come to me and ask me, "Has there ever been a murder in that neighborhood?" And I could pretty much tell you. I can't do that anymore.
Right.
A lot of time has passed. But, some of them were horrendous. Like, I don't even want to think about the details of them. But the fact that you were allowed close to the scene often, that you gained the trust of law enforcement to have
You're on the other side of the tape.
Confidence. You're on the other side of the tape. In theory, often, I was very fortunate to get on the same side of the tape. And that was because of people who had trust in me, law enforcement who had trust in me, private detectives who had trust in me, people who knew that I would be accurate in my reporting, that I wasn't going to be sensational, that I was trying to report the facts, not take a side, just this is what happened, here's how it happened, here's where it happened. And I credit that as, largely what catapulted my career to where it has come to today. Learning how to be a good reporter, how to talk to people. More importantly than talking to people, listening to people. Listening, because I think one of the things that probably I and many people benefit from as reporters is being sort of underestimated. You get in the door because they don't think that you're going to be able to do any harm, and you're not intending to do any harm. You're just looking for the facts.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, and Joey's a big TV guy too. Diane, what you're describing there, I'd like to call the Peter Falk / Columbo theory, right? The guy that bumbles in with the crumpled overcoat and smoking a half cigar and this, I'm not sure.
But there was nothing fake about me in terms of that. I mean, I was legitimately kind of shy, kind of quiet, very much a listener, a reader.
Middle child.
Put things into perspective. Yeah, like one of the top lessons I probably learned as an intern at the Washington Post was one time I went out to cover a murder, and this before cell phones too. So I carried a pocket of dimes, I think, or maybe quarters, but I think it was dimes.
How did you guys cover anything?
Well, you had to run back to the payphone to call in what you'd found out. So you'd go to the scene, you'd get your answers to a few questions, you'd go to the nearest payphone,
drop a dime
at a convenience store, drop a dime, tell the editor or the rewrite person what you knew at that point. They'd ask a few questions, send you back. And I had a fabulous editor that on this one particular story named Phil Smith was his name. He later became features editor of the Washington Post. But he would when I get on the phone, he would say, what kind of neighborhood is that? And I'd say, I don't know, it looks like expensive homes to me. And he'd say, well, define expensive. What do you mean by that? And how much do they cost? What do they sell for?
He's training you.
And I didn't know. I had no idea. I'd just come in from Minnesota, from the farm. I had no idea what a McLean, Virginia was like. So he said, well, how are you going to find out? And I'm like, well, I think I saw a realtor box. Remember when realtor boxes sat out in front of us?
Absolutely.
And I said, let me go back and grab one of those, see what these houses are selling for. So I called him again, and then he said, well, what are the houses made of? And I'm like, made of? I hadn't looked. And so I go back, oh, they're brick, And it was like back and forth, with questions like that. But it taught me to be a better observer, to not just focus on the crime of the day, but really put it in context, really understand kind of what the scene was, not just the visual scene of a dead body, but what the neighborhood was, what the people were like, what the streets were like, what kind of cars were in the park.
Which ultimately is making you a better writer.
They taught you how to back that lens out so that you saw everything from a 30,000.
And when I was a kid, when I was intern, I wasn't doing that. So I learned.
Let me say that we're going to take a quick short break here to identify ourselves. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation, fascinating conversation with Diane Egner, publisher of 83 Degrees Media.
Hi, I'm Louise Coogan, and you're listening to The Conversation with Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter on WMNF 88.5 FM, Tampa.
I gotta say,
what
Diane,
a voice.
it sounded great. I gotta say, she's on Mondays, by the way, from 6 to 9 o'clock right here. She's part of our family at WMNF.
That's our dear one.
It sounds to me like you had the good and great fortune of just every step of the way having somebody that just dropped pearls in your basket and taught you more and more and more that ultimately led you to where you are today. And
Absolutely.
plus, you were a great student as well. I mean, you took your lessons well.
I was just going to say, it's not that the pearls were being dropped, it's that she was looking for the pearls.
That's right.
So,
it's both.
Yeah, it's both. Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of Dashiell Hammett. And so detective fiction to me. I'm always thinking when I read his work that it's like he's ultimately almost like a crime reporter because he's got this spotlight view of what's happening all around. And it makes me also think of Ace Atkins, who was a
Tampa Tribune reporter before he became a famous author.
That's right. And he became a friend of mine here in Tampa. And he would...
he teaches writing now.
He teaches writing. That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Is it University of Mississippi, I think?
I think it is. Yes, right. I think it is. Yeah, and he was, but he was totally engrossed in the whole. Tampa particularly Tampa in its old days, and my connection to him was through Ybor City and the crime that is historic there. But anyway, he would just have this. He was also in love with those kind of, she had legs that went a mile, these
Come on, Mickey Spillane.
Yeah, all these great kind of things.
My husband enjoys those also.
Yeah, well, they're creatively wonderful, absolutely. So, okay, so now you're getting all this stuff, and now we get to this place where you transition to create as a publisher your own organization. Let's talk a little bit about how you get there.
How you came to 83 Degrees.
I mean, what was the seed that brought all that to happen?
The seed was the conversation in the late 2000s, was that the aughts?
The aughts.
About the rise of the creative class and how creatives and intellectuals were going to shape the future.
Right.
And as part of that discussion, this company called Issue Media Group, based in Detroit, came to town. And we decided that there were so many stories we could be telling here that weren't being told. And it wasn't that the media didn't, often the media gets criticized, oh, you didn't cover that. Well, it's not that they don't choose necessarily to cover those stories. It's just there's not enough manpower and woman power to get out there and cover them all. So rather than create a media company that would be another version of what existed, we decided we were going to carve out our own niche. We honed in on what we were going to do based on an advisory board that I put together. I got about 20 people together who were young and old, men and women, different sectors of the community. And we would meet a couple of times, including a gentleman, another author named Peter Kageyama, who had written some stories called For the Love of Cities. And the next book is I'm blanking on right at the moment. But Peter Kageyama, he was here in the Tampa Bay area. He went on to write 3 or 4 more books. But he also was part of this discussion. And we just happened to be sitting at the Columbia Cafe on the balcony of the Tampa Bay History Center one evening in April of 2009. And we were talking about, what are we going to call this thing? We'd done a lot of research, different names. We'd checked out a lot of different, words and names. Almost everything either had 2 or 3 connotations or slang meanings or something else. And one of the guys at the table from Detroit said, this is just like the picture perfect day. I just love it visiting here this time of year. It was in April. And somebody else said, what's the temperature out? And I pulled out my phone and I said, it's 83 degrees. And my daughter, who was sitting next to me, said, Mom, why don't you just call it 83 degrees?
Come on. That is too, I'm not buying any of it. Look, if you want to get in on this conversation and dispute that, 813-239-9663. Send us a text, 813-433-0885. Emails always welcome. DJ@WMNF.org. I think that is fabulous.
I'll tell you a funny little follow-up. After we had kind of honed in on that name, I started asking people, so what do you think of that name? Is that going to resonate? Will it stick? Blah, blah, blah. And I was making the rounds of business people in particular, and I was down in Sarasota, and somebody said, well, do you know that there's an organization here in town called 84 Degrees? And I didn't. And I was like, what is that? No, I never heard of it. So I checked it out. It turned out it was a group of techies who were just getting off the ground. I think they'd been around for a year or two at that point. And they called themselves 84 Degrees because that was the longitude for Sarasota.
Ah, interesting.
And
there's always a reason.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with tech. And so when I talked to the founder of the group, Anand Palagar is his name, he said to me, nobody knows this yet, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. He said, we've decided, because that name says nothing about tech, it doesn't really work for us, so we're going to give it up. We've come up with a new name, and we're going to call ourselves, I think it was a Tampa Bay Technology, or something like that, Tampa Bay.
So they opened the door for you to take 83
degrees. So they opened the door
degrees?
to just take it and run with it. So I was so grateful that he shared that with me, because he probably saved me from changing the name or having a lot of hesitancy about it. But it has stuck. Occasionally men will say to me, why didn't you call it 76? That's what's comfortable.
And I was thinking that.
We don't do comfortable
usually
reporting here.
They have jackets on and they're a little too warm in 83 degrees.
Yeah.
But women love it.
Yeah,
So,
there you go.
And had you ever told that story, Diane? Had you ever really just elucidated that, public airwaves? Have you ever told it at a conference? Have you ever told it at a convention or a public speaking engagement? I'm just curious. Are we breaking ground and breaking news here?
The part about 83 degrees I've shared many, many times. I've written about it. We've published stories about it. The 84 degrees, I haven't shared that very much.
Okay.
So that's kind of, you're breaking news
So
there.
we got a first. There we go.
No. Listen, and I can see why sitting on the top level there, overlooking the river and everything that's there right in front of you. Not the river, but I guess the Hillsborough Bay. Mm-hmm. It's quite an inspirational view. And if you're sitting with the right people,
I highly recommend you go there.
Yeah, it can inspire you to see and do and be all you
can.
Have
a picture of sangria.
Yeah, or two.
Give me a call ahead and I'll meet you there.
There you go.
Well, I would say that 72 degrees. I believe that.
Is that perfection? Is that nirvana?
Well,
72?
I'm one of these guys that loves factoids, and I believe that, as I read somewhere, that the median temperature on Earth that's considered the most comfortable for the human body, I think it's 72. I think, and but I love 83 degrees.
And let me tell you something about 72 degrees. Just FYI, when we were remember the USA Today? Remember USA Today's newspaper that was thrown in every hotel room forever and ever. Amen. It was very colorful, and on the back of the opening section, the front section, on the back was a map of the U.S., right? And every day they gave you the weather report via color, right? So if it was the summertime, you could see it all in red. Some places were really, really dark red. And then other places like Death Valley were white because you knew it was like 110 degrees there.
Right.
And amidst all of that was a little patch of yellow in the southwestern corner of the U.S., and the temperature was always, what was it, Joey? Tell me, what was it?
72.
And where was the place?
Santa Fe.
San Diego. California.
Okay.
Now, I know that I'm never going to be able to afford to live in San Diego, let alone Catalina Island, but maybe they can sprinkle my ashes there when it's all said and done, because those people never sweat. It's 72 degrees year-round. And 100 miles to the east, it's 110 in Death Valley, right there in Palm Springs.
So
I digress.
So what does 83 degrees do today? Let's talk a little bit about that. The kinds of things that you are interested in and focused on, and you and your editor and others. Yeah.
Well, we work with underwriting partners in the community to tell the stories that they are most interested in. So for an example, we might contract with a hospital, say, to write stories about healthcare, because they're really interested in healthcare. Our model for content from the beginning we've called it TIDE, which stands for Talent, Innovation, Diversity, Environment. Those four things being the key elements to what makes a community a place you want to live, work, play, and stay.
Interesting.
The TIDE model has served us very well, and we just apply that essentially to what an underwriter wants. So, say I'm making this up now, a hospital wants to underwrite health, which anybody out there wants to do that, you just give me a call. We then would write about TIDE in healthcare. So talent, innovation, diversity, environment of healthcare. We sometimes will focus in on an issue. Sometimes an underwriting partner will want us to focus on a neighborhood. So, for example, we've worked in the past with the Walmart Foundation to focus on East Tampa. They wanted us to write stories about emerging neighborhoods, investments being made there, entrepreneurs, creatives, et cetera. We have worked with the Tampa Downtown Partnership to write about downtown, what's happening in downtown. So we're picking the stories, we're choosing where they go, how we play them, whether they'll be short briefs or long features or photos or what they might be. But they're saying, with our underwriting support, we'd like you to do more of this. And then we also place ads for them. We place their logo on the site. We work through the Solutions Journalism Fund, which I helped create at the Community Foundation also. So if readers want to put money behind 83 Degrees, that's the way to do it. We get regularly, donations similar to WMNF. If you like the radio station, donate to it, support it. That's how all of the journalists are surviving these days, essentially. In the future, if you want to talk about the future, I think that we're going to see more collaborative efforts across the nation. Media is finding ways in different communities to do collaborations across media platforms and also in communities with key stakeholders in communities. There's a national effort called Press Forward, which if you're not familiar with it, take a look at it. It's something the Knight Foundation started out of Miami. But the idea is to get philanthropic support for news. The old model of ad revenue doesn't really work. So we're all looking for different revenue streams, different ways to be able to pay our people to do what they do.
Right.
83 Degrees, does the opportunity present itself for other cities to capture the essence of 83 Degrees? I guess what I'm asking is, are there franchise opportunities? Do 83 Degrees type
well, Issue Media Group still
platforms?
owns 83 Degrees. They have about 20 publications.
There you go. That's what I was asking.
East of the Mississippi. They're primarily based in Michigan. That's where they're headquartered. So, yes, there are opportunities to start an 83 Degrees-like publication somewhere else. All of our publications in the Issue Media Group family of publications have a name that matches their community. So, for example, in Cincinnati, the name is called Soapbox. And that, if you don't know, Cincinnati is the home of Procter & Gamble. They make soaps.
Right.
And it has the double meaning of,
get up on your soapbox.
Get up on your soapbox and shout out the good news.
I love it. That's very clever.
So everyone's a little bit different. We have one in Michigan called Catalyst that tells the stories of cutting-edge research and innovation. We have one in Detroit called Model D, reflecting the auto industry's history.
Anything in your home state?
Nothing in Minnesota, no.
Well, Diane,
East of the Mississippi, I said.
Oh, that's right. You did say that. So the radio stations there, as everybody knows, starts with W, right? The call letters start with W.
Yes.
Everything west of the Mississippi start with the letter K. I didn't come to learn that until I was an adult.
It's interesting.
Why do those things get stuck in your head, Joey?
I don't know. WMNF.
WMNF.
You have to say W.
Or KDTV, that kind of thing.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. This is causing me to think about something that might be in the heads of someone in our audience listening. This concept of underwriting. And I think that you would be comfortable with the critique. Could that be critiqued as news that is coming to you that is somehow controlled by a how do I say this? By purchase or by money?
People ask that all the time. Yeah, it's not an unusual question.
Okay.
We modeled our revenue model after public broadcasting. If you remember, I said I came out of WUSF.
Viewers like you.
I did 83 Degrees
Listeners
and
like you.
WMNF. Exactly. So when we were, at WUSF and here at WMNF, you might have an add-on that says something like, stories about entrepreneurship are made possible by funding from the Kauffman Foundation.
Right.
So Kauffman is saying, go write about entrepreneurship. They're not saying go write about you and you and you. They're saying go write about entrepreneurship. That's what underwriting is. So we use that as our primary model. We also will do what we call partner content. So if a city wants a specific thing elevated, or anybody, not just a city. In our case, we have a contract, for example, with the city of Clearwater to write specific stories. And we put a little box around it and we label it partner content, and we have a little note on there, an editor's note that says this story was paid for by the city of Clearwater. It's not terribly different from sponsored content that you see everywhere, except sponsored content tends to be stuff like, take this pill and lose 100 pounds in 20 minutes. It tends to be that.
Where can I get that pill? Where can I get that pill?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
ours is really, in my mind, a whole lot more legitimate.
Absolutely.
And a lot more real. And we're not they might say, like, go write a story about development along US 19. But they're not saying how to write the story or what to write in the story. They want a story that reflects development along US 19.
I have a question for Diane, and this is in keeping with the theme for this month here at WMNF on the public affairs side of things is environmental issues, right? So, Diane, 83 Degrees, take a position or just maybe enlighten us, the listeners, what environmental issues keep coming to the fore? What ones do you see propping up all the time that you could address today?
Here in the Tampa Bay area?
Correct.
Absolutely. There's so much around how the weather is changing, how sea level rise is affecting our community.
Hello. We're going to set records today and tomorrow, y'all. Record highs.
If you really want to get a better feel, I think, for what sea level rise could mean for our city, take a water taxi ride or take a history center tour down the Hillsborough River and look at the buildings that are so close to the water right now at normal. Imagine if the sea level goes up 2 feet, 8 feet, like they're projecting in 100 years, or what that's going to mean for our community, for the houses on Davis Island, those that are left, and for the houses
on the Hillsborough
River and along Harbor Island, and in Ruskin and Apollo Beach and all over Pinellas. Just if you look outside, if you drive around very much or you just get around very much, it's patently obvious that sea level rise is going to be a big factor here. What the communities are doing to mitigate that, how to be resilient once it happens, those are the kinds of stories we're most interested in. We're trying to focus from what we call a solutions journalism perspective on what's the fix. There's a column in the New York Times called "What's the Fix?" And it's kind of like that. Like, okay, we all know there's this problem. What are we going to do about it? And here's the smart people who are trying to fix it.
Right.
And so that when we say talent and innovation and diversity and environment, climate change issues hit on all of those. Who are the smart people trying to fix this? What are the innovative ideas they're coming up with to fix it? What diversity do we have in our community? Sometimes diversity gets portrayed as black, white, Hispanic, as if that's all there is. We know, all of us who've lived here, that our community is one of the richest, most incredibly diverse communities of people from all over the world who live here and who bring with them all kinds of assets, all kinds of talent, all kinds of food and entertainment and culture and things that we all can celebrate and we all take advantage of.
Absolutely.
It's what I love about Tampa.
It's what makes our area unique and special. And when you combine that, I think, with the fact that the old-time Tampeños, the people that have been here 2, 3, and 4 generations, also lend a quality of graciousness, and I don't want to say humility, but humility certainly plays a part into it. We're just friendly people. It's friendly. And I said, circle back around now to the comment I made at the top about Minnesota nice. I think there's something about Tampeño nice
that's similar
as well. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so we have. It's funny, we have a Midwest ethic. Think Chicago, think the great cities of the Midwest, Madison, Wisconsin, certainly, any city in Minnesota. Why did Hibbing come to mind? I don't know. It's cold there.
Hibbing's where Bob Dylan came from.
Of course. We know this. I think that's what binds us, the fact that we have that. And so we're grateful that you're still at the helm of 83 Degrees. Diane, tell us in the minutes that we have left, what's around the next corner for 83 Degrees? Tell us what we can get excited about coming in the future. Or if you need any help, or make a solicitation for young scribes, young journalists, students.
Well, we do work with students at the University of South Florida and also the University of Tampa. We're open to working with students. Sometimes there are limitations on what they're able to do and how much time they can commit to it. We understand that, and we try to do what we can to make it a comfortable fit for them as well as for us. We pay all of our writers, we pay all our photographers, we pay our editors, et cetera, et cetera. So exciting things ahead. We are more in idea stages than they're ready to launch at this point. We're always looking for additional funding to enable us to do these story ideas. But there's a lot of things that I could go through that would probably take me an hour and a half. But
we'll bring you back. We'll bring you back. Diane Egner, part 2.
We're considering ways that we can lift up the voices of people who don't get heard. The people of diversity that I'm talking about earlier, the voices of youth, the voices of old people, the people who have a lot to say, a lot to contribute, who maybe get dismissed sometimes. I would like to do more around those kinds of storytelling, and we can work with people who think maybe they're not that good at writing or whatever. We can help them figure
inspire
that out.
them to follow their path.
Follow their.
Do you have the opportunity to work with our dear friend Kim DeFalco? Because Kim's out there in the community taking pictures. I've never seen anybody that works harder than Kim DeFalco, and she's an Ybor City, Palmetto Beach resident. But I mean, Kim is.
I've known Kim for many years.
Everywhere.
Yeah. She's one of our go-to photographers.
A great writer too.
Fabulous.
She's a pretty good writer.
Wonderful to work with.
Yes,
absolutely.
We love her. So Kim, if you're listening, keep up the great work.
She does some photo stories for us in particular. That's what she does probably the best. And you can just Google her, or not Google, but search for her name on our website, and you'll find all kinds of stuff by her.
I love those ideas that you just talked about in terms of voices that are not getting the attention they maybe should be getting. Mm-hmm. I like that idea a lot. And I think that's nice that this, now I'm understanding a little bit better how underwriting could allow for a kind of creative outlet that normally would not be present, because how would these things get covered? How do these stories get covered if there isn't some way to, if there isn't somebody, a resource?
Especially as local media is being pinched financially. The Times, when I worked at the Tampa Tribune, I think there were somewhere around 400 reporters, and the Times had about the same number of reporters, like 800 reporters in the state of Florida. And pretty much they're gone. All the Tampa Tribune reporters are gone. About 40 or so maybe are left at the Times. I'm not sure exactly how many, but it's not many.
Joey, let's ask Diane if it would be the acme of foolishness to consider that maybe someday in the future we could see another publication here in Tampa vis-a-vis the Tribune Times or something else. I mean, or is the model just completely...
The story of newspapers in America.
Yeah.
Diane?
In a couple of
been there a lot.
In a couple of minutes we have left.
Newspapers are going to continue to hurt. I mean, they're going to remain vibrant, I believe, as digital publications. The cost of newsprint, the cost of having a physical office, the cost of a printing plant, and if tariffs go into effect against Canada, expect newsprint to go up. Wood products are the number one import from Canada. So there's lots of reason to know that digital is our future. I think that local is most important. We all are inundated, overwhelmed by national news of all stripes, all perspectives, all kinds of things. But where it really is needed most is local. What's happening in your neighborhood, what's happening in your community, what's happening among the industry or people that you care most about. So that's the niche we try to help fill, and I think you're going to see more of that.
That's where an 83 Degrees, or again, as I alluded to earlier, a Creative Loafing can fill those gaps.
Absolutely. Creative Loafing does a great job.
Man on the street kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's got a hot story and they need to get it to you, can they just submit it to you like that? How does that work?
It's best to email it to editor@83degreesmedia.com. Our editor is Chris Curry. When I started 83 Degrees, I did everything. But about 2 years ago, I brought him in to do the wordsmithing. And now I'm primarily focused on bringing in money to pay him and everybody else.
Because you got tired of doing everything?
It's not that I got tired of doing everything.
That's a big workload.
Yes, it is.
It was, and I loved it. I was a 24/7 kind of gal, but I've always been that way.
I'm sure you have. I can see it.
Well, we're grateful. We're grateful for the time that you're spending.
And the other thing I want to say for anyone who goes to 83degreesmedia.com is I won't embarrass you with all of the organizations that you have served on boards that are in your resume.
I'm not embarrassed.
But
I'm proud of it.
I did.
Well,
you should be proud of it. But I'm just saying, it's very clear. It's easily clear to see what your community commitment has been for a long time.
I am committed, and I most recently joined the Florida Humanities Board and believe strongly that humanities are our future, the future of humanity. And
that's right.
So can we bring... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The more we know about our history and our culture and our arts, the better.
Yes.
So can we bring you back at some point in the not too distant future to maybe start the conversation with STEM and STEAM and the importance of the arts and humanities in our culture and community?
Yeah,
because this has been a wonderful, wonderful.
Back with me from the Florida Humanities.
Please, please, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Diane, so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Offering your time.
Thanks for doing this.
We hope we asked the right questions. Joey, who's coming up next?
Well, next we have the amazing.
Is he amazing?
I'm looking at him. I see him dodging in the next room. He's like, oh no, he's going to say something. The amazing governor of grooves, the master of music, Jim Bannon is there live. And also we have, thank you today for Jessica Green, who has been our OG on the board. And we also have...
And Santiago for answering our phones today, at least
Thank you, Santiago.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be here again next week.
We can't do this without you.
You're listening to WMNF Tampa.
This is the Scoop for Wednesday.
Wonderful.
I'm Josh Holden with the WMNF News headlines. Dozens of